veto. This morning on the KDPG Sunday edition, we will be talking about this and some other issues with one member of Western Pennsylvania's congressional delegation who says that he will not support the Iran nuclear deal. He is Republican Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania's 3rd Congressional District, including Butler County. David Trimman, the executive editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, is away this week. John Allison, the associate editor, joins us for this morning's discussion.
Thank you.
Congressman, thanks so much for being with us this morning on the KDPG Sunday edition. Why are you so opposed?
Well, I think that in negotiations or in deal making, it's usually you don't get the deal you deserve, you get the deal you negotiate. First of all, I question why we would even sit down with Iran, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Give them some type of legitimacy where they don't match up with us on any plane when it comes to moral integrity or their intentions. And when we look at that, this is a history. This isn't some brief snapshot. We know by looking at the running footage who Iran is and what Iran's plans are. The idea initially was that they would never get nuclear weapons. All we've done is push back for a little bit. We have now created a situation in that part of the world where the other people in the neighborhood, if Iran's going to reach this proportion, they are too. This is going to be the unintentional consequence. And while they call it a historic agreement, it certainly is a historic agreement. And for those of us who study history, go back to the 30s and look what happened with Germany, the Nazis, and as they started to pursue their efforts to take over Europe. This is a very dangerous agreement, not just for that part of the world, but for America. We have put ourselves in a very dangerous position.
One could argue that what we've been doing so far, while it has hurt Iran economically, it has not stopped their other advances, and this agreement's not going to stop it either.
Well, but on the other hand, I keep hearing, well, we had to get to some type of agreement because the Iranian people are suffering so greatly, and it's causing a great effect on them locally. So I always say, listen, again, not the deal you deserve, but the deal you negotiate. Turn up the heat on the negotiations. The other thing that I think is stunning, that before we even sat down with these people, we said, you have 4 Americans imprisoned. You want to sit down? And we're going to deal in good faith? Before we even sit down at the table, our 4 Americans come home today, not next week, not next month, not next year. We're not going to sit down and talk about it. They come home first, and then we'll consider whether we want to sit down and talk with you. I think it is foolish for the most powerful country in the world, the leader of the free world, to sit down with a country that is the worst when it comes to human rights and sponsoring terrorism around the world, and say, let's get on an equal basis, let's sit down and have a conversation on how we can help each other. Stunning.
The president said this, I'm going to quote him, consider the alternative. Consider what happens in a world without this deal. Without this deal, there is no scenario where the world joins us in sanctioning Iran until it completely dismantles its nuclear program. Nothing we know about the Iranian government suggests that it would simply capitulate under this kind of pressure. He goes on to say, in Iran, armed with a nuclear weapon would be far more destabilizing and far more dangerous to our friends and to the world.
Yeah, well, the president's very good at wordsmithing and at presenting something that is factually not true. We know that when you sit down, the way we sat down, and cave in and cave in and cave in because you're so anxious to get to a deal that makes you look good. This is stunning that we would allow this to happen. What the president says, maybe in his mind makes sense. But if you study world history, never does appeasement and somehow making sure that people feel good and trying to just get to something that maybe helps them a little bit but does not help us. This is a very dangerous position for the world to be in. The unintentional consequences, Stacey, are going to be incredible. We've got to be able to stop this.
Well, but if one of the goals is to stop Iran from building a nuclear weapon, what's happening right now isn't stopping them.
Well, who says it's not stopping them?
But most of the information that comes out indicates they're on the road to making one.
And you and I both know the stronger sanctions. If we're going to hit somebody, you hit them in the wallet. You hit it where it really hurts. If they're truly on their backs and spiraling downward, why would you turn off the heat? I would have turned up the heat. And these have consequences, severe consequences. Again, appeasing somebody or trying to somehow get to an agreement that allows them to do what they wanted to do to begin with is not good. I just think you take a stronger stance. I don't think you take a softer stance. The United States of America is going to give in to Iran because somebody says they're going to get there anywhere. Really? Who's going to allow them to get there?
Okay, but from the beginning of this, you just didn't want to talk to them at all. You just thought they were not worthy of talking to. They should just be ignored? Well, at the beginning, when you said, why can we sit down with Iran and talk?
Usually you sit down across the table with somebody who has a mutual goal. And if it is to have peace in the world, that's not who these people are. They chant death to Israel, death to America every day. If you think that these are people that you want to sit down with in a bar and have a beer and maybe over some hot wings, discuss how we can help each other, their goal is not to help us, not to bring peace. Their goal, as you know, is to take over the world. There is no give with these people. It's one-sided. And so the only thing I know is the way you fight force is with force. You don't cave in.
Okay, for example, we had an accord with the Soviet Union on arms control back in the very dark days of the Cold War. Was that foolish?
Well, let's go closer. Let's go to the reset with the Soviet Union. How's that working out? And I would just say to you, just coming back from Central Europe and talking to people in Lithuania, in Finland, in Poland. Now, we talk about Russia as a country across the ocean. You know what they talk about Russia? A country across the street that wants to come into their house right now. And we're saying, well, we hit the reset button. We've lowered a lot of our standards and allowed them to build up. We've allowed them to do things they should have never been able to do. And we say, well, somehow, if we're just nice to them, they'll be nice to us. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. Also in this agreement was Russia, China, Germany, Great Britain, France.
Yes.
This wasn't just America. It was a big, complex deal with many levers. Do you like the idea of those other countries being part of this?
Here's what I don't like. I don't really think that by sitting down and having Russia and China in on it, and at the last minute, turning the tables and saying, okay, on ballistic missiles and conventional weapons, you'll need to allow them to do that. That was an 11th hour. Hell, that was an 11:59, not midnight, that they threw that piece in. And because we didn't want to upset the deal, we said, okay, fine. They're going to be allowed to import ballistic weapons and conventional weapons. That wasn't the goal from the set. So if you go into an agreement and you're willing to give and you're willing to back off, that just tells the other side, I'll just keep asking for more because you know what? I got them exactly where we want them. And that's what we did. We caved. They come out on top of it. And again, Iran, with its record, versus the United States with our record, the biggest defender of personal freedom and liberty around the world. And we're saying, well, because Russia was there and China was there, we need to really reconsider because they're really good friends of ours.
Do you put any stock in the idea that in Iran, the people, there's a big sort of attraction to America? I mean, you got the leaders, and it's an oppressive regime, and it's awful. But there's a groundswell of support of people in Iran who, you know, people to people.
The idea being that if this is perhaps maybe a backdoor way to turn Iran around and be not as aggressive and a supporter of terrorism, because the idea being that the people of Iran do not necessarily agree with the leadership of Iran.
All right. Well, I think, though, you're confusing what the people of America maybe not agreeing with the leadership of America and being able to do something about it. The people of Iran not agreeing with the leadership of Iran, that means absolutely nothing. They're going to continue in the path that they're on. And I sometimes wonder, we have become, our culture has allowed us now that we think that we can just talk our way through it. Academically, we can sit down and we can have a conversation that's nice and forward. I would just say, please, look at history. In athletics, people always look at game films. Not the program with the really nice pictures. They look at the actual running footage of what people do. I would just suggest, look at history and look who Iran is and what Iran has done since the 70s. And if we think that somehow the people are going to have a voice and their leaders are going to change their heart, I would say that's not true. And we're seeing it all over the world.
Sanctions have brought them to the table. It's true. And a lot of nuclear scientists were killed in this. Israel was assassinating them, and we sent the Stuxnet into blew up their centrifuges. So there's been a lot of history so far.
Oh yeah, I'm aware of the history, but I'm also aware, I know the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. And I would say when you study history, when you're fighting for survival versus fighting to take over people, there's a big difference. People who are fighting to keep themselves alive versus people who are fighting to kill them, there's a huge difference. And so when Israel comes into the battle, I think sometimes we want to disconnect so fast and say, they've done things that are bad too. They're trying to stay alive. They're protecting themselves. They're not out trying to go after other people. People are coming in and attacking them.
We only have a few more seconds left in this particular segment, and I'd like to put an end to this one so we can move on to some other topics later. So, first of all, your prediction, will it be rejected by the House and the Senate?
Well, my prediction is that from the very beginning, it was never called a treaty. It was called an agreement. Under a treaty, there would have been different levers and stuff that could have been brought into play. With this, it's going to take an overwhelming majority of both the House and the Senate to get there. In the House, we're going to have about 244 Republicans are going to vote against it. We need to pick up about 45 Democrats. And in the Senate, we have to somehow find a way that 13 or 14 of our friends in the Senate, Democrats, would come across and say, we need to stop this. Not for our parties, by the way. This is not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. This is an American issue. This is a world issue. We have to forget politics right now.
Do you think you'll be able to come up with those numbers?
You know who will make the difference, Stacey? People who live As those people represent and calling them and telling them, you know what, I'm watching this very closely. We need you to vote with your